This is Cromar from TGN, welcoming you to another World of Warcraft Cataclysm beta video. This is part 10 of the 22-part series DPS rundown, and today we are covering the Frost Death Knight. Now this is a really fun build, and there's actually two variations on it, and I am going to test both for you. Much like Fury Warriors, you can either do Dual Wield or a two-hander, and they're supposed to be balanced to be identical. I am going to test both versions and show you the DPS counters for both and see if they're within at least the margin of error. So for my first spec, I'm going to show you the two-hander spec. They're almost identical. The main difference is that you have these two talents. This is the dual wielding one, and this is the two-hander one. And then you have an additional talent you have to take if you're dual wielding. But that's okay. It's not that hard to take this talent. There's actually a lot of junk talents I have to take here just to fill out the tree. For example, this extra range on your spells is pretty useless except for Chains of Ice and PvP. That's about all it's good for. For PvE, I would definitely take this point out to put this in Nerves of Cold Steel. And then Lichborn, again, is also a PvP talent that I've taken here. I mean, you know, every now and then it might be helpful to be able to purge a fear on a boss. So I'm not saying this is completely useless in PvE, but it's pretty close. So that's three talent points right there you can put in that Nerves of Cold Steel. Without a problem. Then, on top of that, you have Endless Winter, which you can easily take a point or two out of. Although I like Mind Freeze, and I like having the runic power cost taken off of it. It's not really necessary, because you're going to have a surplus of runic power most of the time as Frost anyway. The only other talent you don't take, Chillblains, is of course for PvP primarily, and on a Pale Horse is almost exclusively for PvP. I would also take this for leveling just because of the convenience factor, but for PvE DPS this is totally unnecessary. But if I was in a situation where I just wanted to get rid of talent points and I just didn't like this talent for some reason, I would put it in here, I guess. Well, I don't know. There's not a lot of times I would take this actually. For the extra talents, outside of Frost, there's only about 9 points you need to place. Bladed Armor, Attack Power, that's a no-brainer. Extra Spell Hit, of course, and Epidemic, which just makes it easier to keep your fevers, your plagues going, so that's all must-have. The only other possibilities here, you have the improved Blood Tap, but in order to get that, you have to dump one of these talents, and that's unacceptable. And then you have Butchery, which is very weak, but it does provide a very small bonus if you were to take it. So let's take a look at glyphs. Now, I believe glyphs are going to be identical for either spec, dual wield, or two-hander. Glyph of Frost Strike is obvious. This is one of your best abilities, so you must take this. And same with Glyph of Obliterate. These are just raw damage increases that you have to take. And Glyph of Howling Blast, this is mostly convenience. It just makes it a lot easier to keep your Frost Fever going. I strongly recommend this glyph. There's not a lot of other options. Keep in mind that you can no longer use Rune Strike except in Blood Presence, so you're not going to have any use out of that in DPS. You don't need Glyph of Death Coil because Frost Strike entirely replaces your Death Coil, so don't worry about that. Glyph of Icy Touch is maybe a possibility, but the amount of damage you actually gain from here is incredibly tiny. I think that just the runes you save by using Howling Blast instead of Icy Touch makes up for that damage automatically. And then, of course, you have Glyph of Raised Dead, but since you're not Unholy, your ghoul is not up for very long. It's only up for 30% of the time, so this is still useful, but I still say that the saving all the runes on your Howling Blast is much better. Keep in mind you're going to be getting constant free Howling Blast, so that essentially makes your Frost Fever stay up forever for no cost. For major glyphs, there's nothing really important to get. I did get Hungering Cold just because Hungering Cold is actually pretty useful for ad control. I can personally attest to that. Playing a warrior tank and having a DK DPS helping me control ads that spawned on Conclave of Wind with Hungering Cold. It was really cool, so I'm definitely a believer that this spell is useful. And this just makes it a little bit easier to use, so I do recommend taking this, since there's really nothing else to take in major glyphs. I mean, Anti-Magic Shell is pretty good, and of course the AoE talents, Blood Boil and Pestilence, but that's about it. So let's talk about the rotation a little bit. This is actually a lot more complicated than Unholy, about twice as complicated actually, with a lot more buttons to press, and you're actually going to be struggling to spend your runic power at times. Now, for your presence, well, I've done some playing around with Frost versus Unholy Presence, and Frost Presence, of course, adds a lot of extra damage, and I do have the improved Frost Presence talent. But there's a lot of times when you're really struggling to dump your runic power into Frost Strike, and in those times, Unholy Presence brings those faster level cooldowns, and that's actually pretty nice. But then you can get some astounding numbers. Like, let me show you just a recent test here. I actually had an Obliterate crit for 33k with a couple of buffs up. So that does speak very highly towards Frost Presence, but I didn't notice a huge difference, really. I mean, granted, I maybe if I took these 2 points in Frost Presence and put him into another DPS talent. But what else is there to take? I mean, there's like butchery and that's about it. So for these tests, I am going to use Frost Presence, but I'm willing to listen to arguments about Unholy Presence. And I did check the Elitist Jerks forums, and they actually recommend using Unholy Presence, and that's what made me want to test it. But I just didn't notice that much of a difference between the two. Now, for Dual Wield, you definitely want Frost Presence because you need the extra damage. Part of the reason why Unholy Presence is a possibility is because of this ability right here. When wielding a 200 weapon, your auto attacks gain extra runic power. So haste becomes very important in that case. And I can definitely see the argument there. But the extra damage from Frost Presence is pretty insane. I mean, it does make those huge crits with Obliterate. And I know this isn't PvP, burst isn't that important. But I still feel that all the extra damage to your Obliterates and Frost Strikes is going to make up for that. So anyway, let's go ahead and do a quick DPS test. Actually, I'll just show my rotation in action first. Of course, we're going to get a Horn. Open with the Outbreak. I'm not going to use any of my cooldowns just yet. Once you get in here, now you've got all your runes ready to go, right? You got both your diseases, everything's ready to go. So the first thing you're going to do is get an Obliterate out, get Blood Strikes out to get these runes burned. And then you want to maintain, you don't want to necessarily have all your runes burned all the time, because notice how fast your runic power pops up, right? So you got to dump that runic power. And you always want to have some runes ready, because when you're killing machine procs, you want to be able to hit Obliterate immediately for that huge. There's a 28k Obliterate crit, and all I had was my trinket up. I didn't even have Pillar of Frost up yet. Now here I'm getting so many killing machine procs that I pretty much can't spend my runic power. And this is one of the times when Unholy Presence does help. It just helps you spend that Unholy power, or it helps you spend the runic power. But again, that's more convenience than anything else. Now, one of the big challenges here is trying to make sure you spend all of your killing machines on Obliterates. Frost Strikes burn your killing machine procs, and that's very obnoxious, and it's hard to control because, oh, there we go, that's a perfect example. I hit Frost Strike, and after I hit Frost Strike, the thing popped and immediately wasted a killing machine. It's very hard to time that. So anyway, I haven't been watching my diseases, obviously, as you can tell. I'm just trying to show you killing machine here. But, like, I got killing machine up, right, and I've got all this runic power, so I'm going to hit a killing machine, and then I'm going to start spending my runic power. And then, oh, I got a killing machine proc right as Frost Strike launched and wasted it. So that happens constantly. It's very obnoxious. But there's not much you can do about it. I mean, you can keep an eye on it and try not to let that happen. But it does seem to happen on its own. Okay. I need to waste this runic power here so I can get ready for the real test. Okay, let's see those results. Now, when I stopped attacking, I was at about 8k. It's still dropping because of the stupid frost fever. I did wait for my blood plague to run out before I quit to try to mitigate that, but, you know, that's just how it happens. I also had a nice little 5 to 6 second lag burst, and it's been doing this for the last day or two on the beta servers. Every single time I run a test, whether I'm filming or not, I always run into one of those, so I was hoping to film once and not have it happen, but, hey, what are you going to do? So it's a little bit over 8k. I did do a much longer test than normal to hopefully compensate for the lag burst. I did about almost 4 million damage. So hopefully that lag burst will be negligible in the results. But anyway, moving on, let's take a look at our results now. We had an Obliterate crit rate of about 55%, which is pretty good. I usually get about 55 to 60. I have got over 60 on a couple tests, but it's very hard to do because it's so hard to time those killing machine procs. Sometimes you just get stuck and have to use them on Frost Strike, or you just can't avoid it. As you can see, I kept my Frost Strike crit down to about 28%. And since my base crit is so low, you can pretty much guarantee that all those crits, or almost all those crits, were from killing machine procs. Now, your plagues do much less damage, of course. It's not a surprise at all. So let's look at this mastery here, Frozen Heart. This is kind of a middle-of-the-road mastery. It affects Frost Strike and Howling Blast. And, of course, Frost Fever. It knows to add up to only about 40% of your damage. So it does affect some of your damage, and it's definitely worth getting, but I wouldn't worry too much about getting it, about gearing for it. I would definitely gear for haste above everything else. Hit's pretty nice, too, because I did have some Obliterates miss, as you can see. And every time you miss an Obliterate, it still wastes your killing machine proc, it just sucks. It really sucks to have that happen, but that just happens. So hit and expertise are certainly great stats as well. Definitely don't want to miss out on that. And then there's your blood strikes, which are just used to burn off blood runes. Yeah, at the bottom. I try to use Outbreak as much as possible to keep my plagues going, but you do have to use Plague Strike every now and then to refresh it. So yeah, that's the numbers for the Dual Wield, about 8k. So I'm going to go hit up the trainer real quick and respec and try out Dual Wield and come back and do another test, and we'll see how that works out. Alright, let's look at our Dual Wield spec now. I want to reiterate that very little has changed. I've only moved these kind of useless points, the 3 here, into Nerves of Cold Steel, and then swapped your primary talents here from two-hander to Dual Wield. Now keep in mind what this does is it causes your Obliterate, Plague Strike, and so on to hit with both weapons, so this is obviously a very powerful talent, and it does mean you want to have dual slow weapons. In case you were curious, there's no benefit to having a fast offhand weapon as far as I can tell. Now you might be thinking about Killing Machine because of procs here, but the way Killing Machine works is it actually is modulated by your attack speed. It's a proc per minute, which means the faster your attack speed, the less often it procs. That way you still have the same number of procs over time. If you saw how often it procced with the two-hander, then you'll be able to figure that out when you watch it with Dual Wield. So let's see this rotation, see if it changes any. Get our horn going, Outbreak. Now with so many numbers on the screen, it can be difficult to tell how much damage you're actually doing. But we'll be able to review the results at the end and see. As you can see, it's not really that different. It's still just as hard as ever to time those killing machines. But as you can see, the proc rate on Killing Machine is you know, about the same as it was with two-hander. It still procs all the damn time, to the point where you can barely use it. Oh, look, a lag burst. Well, hopefully it happens now and it doesn't happen while I'm doing the real test. There we go. I love the beta servers. Alright, let me just go ahead and burn off this runic power. And wait for the dots to drop and clear my recount, and we'll do the real test. Okay, let's see those results. It looks like I was just a little bit north of 8,400 when I stopped attacking. It's still ticking down because of the way Recount works, of course. So I can't do much about that. But it was about 8,400 DPS, so I'm real happy with those results. It actually shows that Dual Wield is significantly more powerful than two-handers right now. This is pretty consistent with the tests I've done before. It's not too much of a surprise that Dual Wield, I mean, traditionally Dual Wield has always been more effective than two-handers. I was hoping that some of the bonuses you gain from things like the Frozen Waste would actually make up for that, but it doesn't seem to do that. And again, I have tested two-handers in Unholy Presence, and I didn't see a significant difference there. So let's see our breakdown here. The pet made up about 6% of the damage. I'm sorry I didn't show this result with the other test, but my pet did about the same there. About 5%, I think, is what it said on the other test. But anyway, the breakdown is still Obliterate, is still huge. So Obliterate is still your #1 source of damage, followed by Frost Strike, not a surprise at all. Howling Blast, and then so on and so forth. Your Fever's doing not much damage at all. Now, when looking at the results of these tests, I want to reiterate that the devs have intended to make these equal. They've intended to make Dual Wield and two-handers equal, so just the fact that there's a slight discrepancy now doesn't mean there will be at live. I'm just showing the test to show the current state of the beta. So hopefully there's a little bit of a buff to two-handers, or even a nerf to Dual Wield. I don't know. I don't think they're planning on nerfing anybody right now, though. Now, this spec did very well. It did underperform Unholy, but Unholy is just off the charts right now, so I'm not surprised. And that does match previous tests. I've never had Frost even come close to the numbers Unholy gets on any of my tests. So that's it for the Frost Death Knight. Thanks for watching. As always, please rate, please comment, and please subscribe.